My name is Emily Hart, and at 25 years old, living alone in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon, I never imagined that I would become the center of a family scandal so disturbing and humiliating that even now, months later, my hands tremble when I think about it. A scandal that didn't come from strangers or enemies or people lurking in the shadows, but from someone who had been eating dinner at the same table as me for years. Someone my sister trusted with her whole heart. Someone who hugged me on holidays and acted like a respectable man in public, but hid something rotten beneath his carefully polished exterior. I was not prepared for any of it. I had just started a new job as a graphic designer, still paying off student loans, still figuring out adulthood, still trying to understand who I was and what I wanted from life. Meanwhile, my older sister, Madison, 28, married, stable, with a cozy home and a husband people praised, seemed to have everything figured out. Her husband, Daniel Reeves, 29, was the kind of man who fooled everyone. He worked as a physical therapist, talked politely, volunteered at community events, and always seemed to say the right thing when people were watching. But I learned that dangerous men rarely show their ugliness under bright lights. It's in the quiet moments, the stolen seconds, the hidden corners where their real selves crawl out. I remember the first time something felt off. We were at a family dinner celebrating Madison's promotion. The whole room was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the smell of roasted chicken. I was wearing a simple blue dress, nothing flashy, nothing suggestive, but I felt Daniel's eyes on me in a way that made my spine stiffen. At first, I convinced myself it was my imagination. I didn't want to believe that someone so close could be looking at me with something other than the indifference a brother-in-law should have. But then came the messages. The first one arrived late at night. "Couldn't sleep," he wrote. "You seemed sad at dinner. Everything okay?" I responded politely. Nothing personal, nothing emotional, just kindness. But looking back, I realized he wasn't checking on me. He was testing boundaries. And every time I replied with a polite but distant message, he pushed further. Soon the tone changed. Compliments about my body. Comments about how girls your age don't even realize how attractive they are. Then slightly bolder remarks, phrased like jokes but dripping with hidden intention. My stomach tightened each time his name lit up my screen. I didn't want drama. I didn't want to hurt my sister. So I ignored, avoided, pretended not to notice. Like so many young women trying to navigate adult relationships, I told myself it was nothing. But nothing became something the night he sent me a picture. Nothing explicit, but unmistakably inappropriate. A picture no married man should send to his wife's younger sister. I remember staring at the screen, my breath caught in my throat, my brain trying to process what he had just done. I didn't block him that night. I wish I had. I wish I had cut the cord immediately. But part of me was terrified. Terrified of confrontation, terrified of ruining my relationship with Madison, terrified of being blamed, judged, misunderstood. So I said nothing. And silence, I learned, is the oxygen that men like Daniel breathe. The next week, the messages escalated. "You looked gorgeous today. I can't stop thinking about you. Don't pretend you don't feel something too." That last message made me drop my phone. Feel something? About him? Never. The thought repulsed me. But he twisted my silence into encouragement, my fear into desire, my discomfort into consent. And predators thrive on rewriting your reactions to suit their fantasies. It got worse. One afternoon, I visited my sister's house to return a blender she had lent me. Madison wasn't home, but Daniel was. He opened the door with that fake, polite smile, but his eyes betrayed something darker. I handed him the blender, intending to leave immediately, but he stepped closer. Too close, and reached out as if to tuck a loose strand of my hair behind my ear. I jerked back so fast I almost tripped on the doorstep. He chuckled and said, "Relax, Emily, you're too jumpy." My skin crawled. That night, my anxiety was so bad I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment, the way he looked at me like I was prey, the way he acted like touching me was something he had the right to do. Something inside me knew it wouldn't stop. Something inside me whispered that it would get worse. And it did. Much worse. But the moment everything changed forever, the moment I realized silence was no longer an option, was the moment he made a mistake. A big one. One so irreversible that no apology, no excuse, no lie could cover it up. And that was the moment I decided to expose him. I remember the exact moment everything spiraled out of control. The moment when Daniel crossed a line so clear, so undeniable, so revolting that even I, with all my fear and hesitation, could no longer pretend that ignoring him would make him stop. It was a Friday evening around 10, and I was sitting alone in my apartment drinking chamomile tea after a long day at work, scrolling absent-mindedly through design inspiration websites when my phone began buzzing nonstop. At first, I thought something terrible had happened to my sister. Why else would someone call me at that hour? But when I looked down, it wasn't a call. It was message after message after message, all from Daniel. And the content made my blood run cold. The first message was a long paragraph describing in disturbing detail the things he claimed he wanted to do to me. The second was worse. The third was a photo, explicit, graphic, disgusting. Something that made me throw my phone onto the couch and cover my mouth to stop myself from screaming. My heart pounded so hard I felt dizzy. I had never experienced fear like that. Not when I moved to the city alone. Not when I struggled financially after college. Not even when I had health issues last year. No fear compared to the fear of knowing someone you trusted, someone connected to your own family, saw you not as a person, not as a sister-in-law, not as a human being, but as an object to fantasize about. A toy he believed he had a right to. I sat frozen for a long time, unable to breathe, unable to think. Then something clicked inside me. An instinct for survival, for self-protection, for reclaiming control. With shaking hands, I picked up the phone, reopened the conversation, and I did what I should have done months earlier. I saved everything. Screenshots, backups, a hidden folder. Then I blocked his number. But I knew blocking him wouldn't be enough. Men like Daniel don't disappear when you block them. They escalate. So I didn't sleep. Not a minute. I stayed awake until the sun rose, replaying everything in my mind. Every stare, every comment, every message. And with each hour that passed, my fear slowly transformed into anger. Not the screaming, dramatic kind of anger. A deeper, quieter anger. The kind that grows roots. The kind that decides something must change. The kind that gives you courage you never had before. The next morning, I called my sister. When she answered, cheerful and unaware, telling me she and Daniel were making pancakes, I felt my throat tighten so hard I nearly hung up. But I forced the words out. "Madison," I said, "I need you to come to my apartment. Alone." She must have sensed something in my voice because she agreed immediately. When she arrived, she looked worried, brushing her hair behind her ear as she stepped inside. What happened? You sound terrified." I didn't speak. I simply handed her my phone. For several seconds, she stared at the screen, confused. Then the confusion dissolved into horror. Her eyebrows drew together. Her mouth fell open. Her breath caught in her throat. She swiped up, scrolling through message after message, her hands trembling, her eyes filling with tears. Then anger, then disbelief. Then something like heartbreak. She whispered. "Daniel? My Daniel? He sent you these?" I nodded. She covered her mouth with both hands, overwhelmed. Then, after a long moment of silence, she asked the question I had been dreading. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" And at that moment, something inside me cracked. My voice broke as I explained everything. The fear, the guilt, the confusion, the shame. I told her I didn't want to ruin her marriage, didn't want to be blamed, didn't want to lose the only close family I had left in the city. I told her I loved her too much to risk breaking her heart. When I finished speaking, there was a long, heavy silence between us. Madison finally pulled me into a tight embrace, holding me like she used to when we were kids. "Emily," she whispered, You should never have had to carry this alone. Then she stood up, wiped her tears, and said a sentence I will never forget. I'm going home, and he's going to explain every single thing. Today. I followed her to the door, heart racing. Are you sure? You don't have to go alone. She shook her head. I need to hear it from him, and he needs to see that I'm not stupid. What happened next unfolded like a scene in a movie, one where the calm, quiet woman transforms into someone fierce, someone determined, someone unwilling to accept lies anymore. Madison stormed into her house, and before Daniel could finish saying hello, she threw the phone onto the table. Explain, she demanded. Daniel's face turned pale, then defensive, then angry. He tried everything. Denial, excuses, gaslighting, blaming me, claiming the messages were jokes, accusing me of misunderstanding, even going so far as to say I had led him on. But every lie he told collapsed the moment Madison opened another screenshot, another timestamp, another proof. Cornered, guilty, exposed. Daniel snapped. He began yelling, pacing, accusing me of trying to destroy their marriage. He said I was jealous, emotionally unstable, looking for attention, but Madison saw through him. She had always been kind, forgiving, gentle. But betrayal changes people. She told him she wanted a divorce. Immediately. He begged. He threatened. He cried. He slammed his fist on the counter. But nothing could undo the truth. That night, Madison took her clothes, her documents, her dog, and left. She went straight to my apartment, shaking, exhausted, devastated beyond words. I held her as she cried, feeling both guilty and relieved, both broken and stronger than I had ever been. But what neither of us knew then was that Daniel's downfall was only beginning. Because once the truth comes out, once light hits the darkness, everything hiding in the shadows is exposed. And Daniel had more shadows than anyone realized. What neither Madison nor I expected was how quickly everything would unravel once the first thread was pulled. Because Daniel had spent years building a perfectly polished image, a charming husband, a dedicated physical therapist, a polite neighbor. And all it took was one spark of truth for his entire facade to collapse like a house made of wet cards. The day after Madison left him, he started calling both of us nonstop, alternating between begging, threatening, crying, apologizing, and accusing. I blocked him, but Madison didn't at first. She wanted to record everything, to keep every voicemail as evidence, to make sure that if he tried to twist the story, she would have proof. And he did try. He told her I had always flirted with him, that I wanted attention, that I misinterpreted jokes, that I liked the messages, But every lie shattered when Madison reminded him that screenshots don't lie, timestamps don't lie, and his own words were the ones that destroyed him. What we didn't anticipate was how many other women had been quietly avoiding him for years. 2 days after Madison moved out, a woman from Daniel's gym approached her privately and confessed that he had made her uncomfortable multiple times, that he had touched her lower back while spotting her, that he made suggestive comments when no one was around, that he once accidentally brushed his hand against her thigh during a workout. Then a neighbor told Madison that Daniel would hover around her porch when her husband was away, pretending to be friendly but staring too long at her body. And then came the worst confession. Someone from his workplace emailed Madison anonymously, saying she left her job at the clinic partly because Daniel made inappropriate remarks to her during physical therapy sessions. With each new story, Madison's heartbreak deepened, but so did her clarity. Daniel's behavior toward me was not a one-time lapse or a moment of weakness. It was a pattern. A sick, calculated pattern of pushing boundaries, testing women, targeting vulnerability, and hiding behind charm. And Madison realized something else, too. If I had not told her, she might have stayed married to a man who had been preying on other women for years. The truth spread quickly. In Portland, rumors move like wildfire, especially when the man at the center pretends to be a saint. Within a week, Daniel was reported to his workplace. An internal investigation began. His supervisor placed him on leave. Clients requested different therapists. His reputation, once spotless, became stained by whispers he could no longer outrun. People in the neighborhood stopped waving at him. Mothers pulled their daughters closer when he walked by. Even the local community center removed him from the volunteer list, quietly but firmly. And for a man whose entire ego depended on appearing respectable, admired, trusted, this was a punishment far deeper than jail. This was social death. Meanwhile, Madison stayed with me for several months while she rebuilt her life from the ashes of the marriage she thought she had. She cried. Not because she missed him, but because she couldn't believe she had been sleeping beside a stranger for so long. We cooked meals together, watched old movies, took long walks around the neighborhood, and slowly, gently, she began reclaiming pieces of herself that had been swallowed by years of subtle manipulation she didn't recognize until it was too late. As for me, I battled guilt, even though I knew deep down that none of this was my fault. But guilt is a strange creature. It crawls into your bones even when you know logically that you did nothing wrong. It whispered questions late at night. Did I cause this? Should I have told her sooner? Would this have happened if I had done something different? But each time those thoughts surfaced, Madison reminded me of the truth. Daniel had chosen his actions. I had only revealed them. The real turning point came when Madison received an email from Daniel's workplace informing her that multiple complaints had been filed over the years, but none escalated because the women were afraid to speak out or didn't have evidence. That email changed everything. Madison realized that by confronting him, she had not only protected herself and me, she had unknowingly protected future women from being manipulated or harassed. And that was when the guilt finally loosened its grip on me. As the divorce process moved forward, Daniel became more and more desperate. He tried showing up at Madison's workplace. She reported him. He tried waiting outside our apartment building. We filed a restraining order. He tried using mutual friends to send messages. They refused to get involved. In the end, he stood alone, exposed, humiliated, stripped of the respect he once hid behind like armor. The final blow came when the investigation at his workplace concluded. They terminated him. Not publicly, not with dramatic announcements, but quietly, efficiently, permanently. A simple email. Due to violations of professional boundaries and ethical standards, your employment has been terminated. And just like that, Daniel lost everything. His career, his reputation, his marriage, his social circle, the admiration he once fed on like oxygen. He moved out of Portland shortly afterward, leaving behind only the ruins of the life he built on lies. The day he left, Madison and I sat on my apartment balcony, drinking tea, wrapped in blankets, watching the sunset over the city. She turned to me and said, "You saved me." And I realized she was right. Not because I wanted to be a hero, not because I wanted revenge, but because telling the truth, finally, bravely, painfully, had freed both of us from a predator who had hidden in our lives for far too long. And this, I believe, is the real lesson for anyone listening, especially those older than us who were raised in a world where silence was praised and confrontation was feared. Predators thrive when good people stay quiet. Harassment doesn't stop because you ignore it. Manipulators don't stop because you stay polite. Abusers don't stop because you are scared of conflict. They stop when someone finally says, "This ends now." Speaking up is terrifying. It risks relationships, peace, comfort. It shakes everything you thought was stable. But silence is far more dangerous. It protects the wrong person. It sacrifices the innocent. It allows the poison to spread. I learned at 25, far earlier than I ever wanted, that courage isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes courage is simply telling the truth. Sometimes it is showing your sister the messages that break her heart but save her life. Sometimes it is choosing yourself, even when you're afraid. And if there is one thing I want anyone listening to remember, especially women who were taught to endure quietly, it is this. You deserve safety. You deserve respect. You deserve peace. And when someone violates that, speaking up is not betrayal. It is self-preservation. It is strength. It is freedom.